Imagine suddenly discovering that everything you've ever believed about reality is incomplete. Imagine realizing that there is an invisible, pulsating, and living structure sustaining every thought, every dream, and every emotion that passes through your mind. Now imagine someone, more than a century ago, touching that structure with their own hands, and feeling that reality is not just mathematics, but consciousness. That someone was Nikola Tesla. And if you keep watching, you'll realize that his science was never just about machines, electricity, or inventions, but about the secret code that governs the universe itself. Tesla said that there was something behind the curtain of matter, something hidden in the vibration of everything. And this something wasn't a distant philosophical concept. It was real, almost palpable, as present as the air you breathe. But for some reason, humanity has distanced itself from this perception. And the question that opens this journey is simple and disturbing. If there is a divine frequency sustaining everything, why have we been trained to ignore it? Tesla's life was always marked by sensations he couldn't explain. He had intense visions of lights, geometric patterns, and vibrations that appeared without warning. From childhood, this unsettled him. He saw the world with a clarity that his teachers considered exaggerated. For him, every object had an invisible field. Every word had vibrational weight. Even emotions, sadness, fear, joy, seemed to have specific colors. He grew up believing there was something wrong with him. But, in reality, the problem was that he saw what no one else saw. Have you ever felt this? Ever had that feeling that something is happening beyond the surface? Hidden noise, a silent movement that almost touches your consciousness, but escapes at the last second? This sensation has accompanied humanity for millennia, but Tesla was the only one who had the courage to study it as a science. He didn't want vague spiritual explanations. He wanted numbers, formulas, laws. And with each new experiment, he became more convinced that reality responded literally to vibration. But this is where a micro-conflict begins. If reality is vibration, and if everything responds to frequency, then why does modern science insist on treating the universe as a dead mechanism? Why have we never heard of these discoveries? Why have we learned that thoughts have no weight, that emotions have no energy, that consciousness cannot influence the world? Is reality really that simple? Or has someone preferred to teach us only a part of it? Tesla lived like someone carrying a secret. For years, he recorded patterns that few could understand. He wrote numbers, series, harmonic repetitions, as if he were deciphering an ancient language. He believed that nature didn't speak in words, but in rhythms. The sound of thunder, the movement of waves, the human heartbeat, everything revealed to him a greater intelligence. And it was this perception that led him to a shocking conclusion. The universe seems to have a signature, a central vibration that connects all things. This is where the question that could change everything arises. If there is a universal signature, a vibration that precedes matter, time, and space, does that mean the universe is, in a way, conscious? And if it is conscious, does that mean there is an intention behind existence? And if there is intention, then what many call God may not be a religious figure, but a frequency? Gradually, Tesla began to realize that his mind functioned like an antenna. When he was silent, when he isolated himself from the world, something opened up within him. He said he felt as if thoughts were not being produced, but received, as if he were tuning into ideas. This left him restless and fascinated. He wrote, "The universe responds to those who know how to listen." What does this mean? That there is an invisible dialogue happening right now, a dialogue between human consciousness and the vibrational field of the universe. But almost no one notices, and almost no one asks. It's curious to think that for Tesla, the world seemed more alive than for anyone else. He saw meaning where others saw chaos. He found patterns where others saw chance. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever looked at a coincidence so absurd that it seemed to have been placed there on purpose? Have you ever had the feeling that something called you, even without being able to explain what? Tesla believed that this was not coincidence but attunement, small vibrational reminders that there is something greater guiding everything. But this realization brought Tesla one of the deepest dilemmas of his life: how to study something that science didn't recognize, how to demonstrate something that the eyes couldn't see, but that the heart and physics confirmed. He knew that, By touching on this idea, he would be treading on forbidden territory, not because of the scientists, but because of the impact it would have on the emotional structure of humanity. Because if people discovered that their thoughts influence the surrounding field, that their emotions can alter their own energy, that the universe responds directly to their vibration, then everything would change. You would change, institutions would change, and perhaps that's why you've never heard this story the way it really happened. Because Tesla wasn't just studying electricity, he was trying to understand the vibration that sustains consciousness itself. That which many ancient traditions call the divine breath. That which modern science calls the quantum field. That which he quietly called the signature of the Creator. Now take a deep breath and consider this question. What if everything you feel, intuitions, premonitions, chills, strange dreams, are signs that you're already connected to this frequency, even without knowing it? What if your whole life you've been trying to tune into something bigger, but never found the words to describe it? Tesla found it, but nobody told you. And the reason they hid this is simple. Because when a person understands their own vibration, they become impossible to manipulate. They become conscious, and a conscious person is the greatest threat to any system that relies on fear, guilt, or ignorance. But before we get into that part, before we reveal how Tesla first encountered that frequency, one last question arises, closing this section like a riddle. If there really is a primordial vibration, a frequency that shapes reality, then how did Tesla manage to perceive it? And most importantly, what exactly happened the moment he approached her? In the next part, you'll discover what Tesla experienced that night and why it became the most forbidden chapter of his research. When Tesla described in his personal letter that he had touched the thought of God, he wasn't using poetic metaphors. He was trying to translate into human words something that transcended language. But to understand what happened that night, we need to go back a few months earlier, when everything began to transform within him, almost imperceptibly. Tesla spent long periods alone, surrounded by machines that only made sense to him. His nights became longer than his days. He slept little, ate almost nothing, and lived immersed in seemingly endless calculations. However, there was something different, a growing restlessness, as if he were approaching something that shouldn't be found. He himself described this feeling as the silent murmur of the universe, a subtle, almost imperceptible noise that seemed to call him to some place he didn't understand. Perhaps you've felt something similar before. That moment when everything becomes strangely quiet, as if the world were waiting for something. Or that instant when you feel you're in the right place, at the right time, even without a logical explanation. For most people, these sensations are dismissed as coincidences. But Tesla was not an ordinary person. He didn't believe in coincidences. He believed in patterns. And he began to realize that this silent calling had rhythm, had structure, had intention. At that time, Tesla was obsessed with the concept of resonance. He believed that every object in the universe had its own natural vibration, and that by finding that vibration, it was possible to influence or even modify the object. It was a simple, yet revolutionary idea. He thought, if an entire bridge can collapse due to the resonance of rhythmic footsteps, what would prevent human emotions from influencing objects, places, or even surrounding energy fields? It was a dangerous question, and he knew it. To test his hypotheses, Tesla set up experiments that resembled rituals. He adjusted frequencies with millimeter precision, observed invisible oscillations, and recorded every detail with obsessive accuracy. His assistants listened to stories about lights appearing out of nowhere, vibrations that passed through the ground like water, and sounds that no one could explain. Many were frightened and asked to leave. Others thought Tesla was exceeding the limits of sanity, but he knew he was getting closer to something bigger. Sometimes, while sitting for hours in front of the machines, Tesla had such strong mental impressions that his body reacted on its own. He felt waves of heat, intense chills, as if someone were running their hand over his energy field. On one of these nights, he reported seeing geometric shapes floating in the air, triangles, spirals, patterns that repeated themselves like a universal language. He tried to touch these shapes, but they disappeared. He didn't tell anyone. He kept it to himself, afraid of being ridiculed, and perhaps also afraid to admit that he didn't understand what was happening. This is where a connection to everyday life becomes clear. How many times have you had the feeling that something was in the air, How many times has your body reacted before your mind, as if sensing something that hadn't yet happened? A message you knew was coming, a person you sensed you would meet, a decision that seemed right even before it was thought? This isn't imagination. This is vibration. The same vibration Tesla studied, but translated into everyday human experience. One night, Tesla sat before a machine he had been fine-tuning for weeks. It was an oscillator capable of generating frequencies so precise they could influence the surrounding field. He was alone in the laboratory, surrounded by tools, papers, and almost absolute silence. When he turned the machine on, something strange happened. The sound was so pure it seemed to pass through the entire room without losing strength. Tesla described that for a moment, he didn't know if he was hearing the sound or feeling the sound. It was as if his whole body was vibrating. As he adjusted the frequency, the air began to change. This isn't easy to explain. It wasn't wind or temperature. Tesla said the air gained density, as if it were becoming more alive. The laboratory lights began to pulse slightly, as if they were breathing. And then something happened that he could never fully explain. The light from one of the lamps changed color, without him making any physical modifications. It was as if the vibration was rearranging matter itself. Imagine this happening right in front of you, a simple frequency shift altering how the material world behaves. It's unsettling, it's fascinating, it's forbidden, because it suggests that reality isn't fixed. It responds, and if it responds, it means it can be influenced. Tesla stepped away from the machine for a few seconds. He needed to observe without interfering, and it was at that moment that he noticed something even stranger. His mind was completely silent. There were no thoughts, no internal dialogues, no mental noise. It was as if his consciousness had been tuned to the frequency. He described this state as the sensation of being inside the universe itself, as if there were no separation between him and the environment. This is an important point. Think about yourself. How often does your mind become truly silent? How often can you completely stop thinking? Tesla believed that this silence, forced by vibration, was the gateway to something greater. He thought that when the human mind aligns with certain frequencies, it stops producing thoughts and begins to receive thoughts, like an antenna that finally finds the right station. In that profound silence, Tesla began to feel a presence. It wasn't a voice, it wasn't an image, it wasn't a visible entity. It was a feeling, an intelligence, something that seemed to observe, respond, interact. He wrote, "I can't explain it. It wasn't me. It wasn't the environment. It was something." For an extremely rational man like Tesla, admitting this was almost a sacrifice. A wave of energy coursed through his body like a gentle but continuous shock. Tesla breathed deeply, trying to maintain control. He knew he was entering uncharted, perhaps dangerous territory. But he also knew he couldn't back down. He readjusted the machine, searching for the exact resonance he had felt seconds before. And when the harmonics aligned, the most important moment of his scientific life occurred. The air vibrated, as if traversed by a living presence. The entire room seemed to contract and expand simultaneously, as if the space were breathing. Tesla felt an internal impact, somewhat emotional, almost spiritual. And it was then that he wrote the phrase that would change everything. "I have touched the thought of God." But what does this mean? Tesla never explained it in detail, perhaps because he didn't have enough words, perhaps because he knew no one would believe him, perhaps because understanding it would require the world to completely change the way it perceives reality. However, he described this moment as the sensation of having accessed a field where consciousness and matter meet, a point where everything seems connected, where nothing is separate, where the universe seems to think, feel, and respond. Do you think that's an exaggeration? Consider something from your own life. Have you ever been so connected to a moment that everything around you seemed synchronized? Have you ever experienced an instant where everything made sense, as if the universe were aligned with you? Perhaps when meeting someone special, when making a crucial decision, when feeling something you couldn't explain. Tesla believed that these moments are small glimpses of the same vibrational field that he accessed experimentally. A field in which everything connects. But here, an important question arises. If Tesla really managed to artificially reproduce a vibration that connects consciousness and reality, who would have an interest in keeping this hidden? And why? The answer to this begins to emerge when we understand what happened after that night. Because Tesla didn't just feel the frequency, he began to investigate it. And the more he investigated, the more he realized he had crossed an invisible boundary, a boundary that should never have been crossed. What Tesla found next not only frightened his colleagues and funders, but also the very system that controlled scientific knowledge at the time. And that's where the question that will open the next chapter of this story begins. If the vibration Tesla discovered truly connects mind, body, and universe, why has this discovery disappeared from books, records, and history? The answer isn't simple, but you're about to find out. From the moment Tesla had that experience in the laboratory, the instant he wrote that he had touched the thought of God, something changed not only in his research, but in his own perception of reality. He no longer viewed his machines as mechanical structures, but as instruments capable of communicating with the invisible fabric of existence. And it is at this point that his story begins to diverge from conventional science and enter territories that few would dare to explore. In the days immediately following that experiment, Tesla reported a constant feeling of inner alertness, as if he had opened a door that shouldn't have been opened. He began to notice subtle changes in his own mind. Ideas came more quickly, as if he were receiving information instead of producing it. He described this as an intelligence that speaks without words. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever had such clear premonitions that seem to come from somewhere beyond your logic? This feeling, familiar to many, was, for Tesla, proof that human consciousness has access to something much greater. The question here is inevitable. How far can a human mind go when it surpasses the limits imposed by its own perception? And more importantly, who benefits when those limits are maintained? Tesla began reviewing his old notebooks, cross-referencing patterns, retrying old experiments and making connections that previously seemed impossible. He repeatedly realized that his most daring projects were interrupted not by technical failures, but by external forces, influential people, institutions, funders, government agents, as if somehow someone was always one step ahead of him, deciding what should or should not be revealed to the world. This is where the narrative gets complicated. Have you ever noticed how certain advances appear and disappear from the media without explanation? Or how impressive discoveries are quickly replaced by irrelevant news, as if there were an effort to redirect public attention? Tesla was one of the first people to realize that society is not driven by knowledge, but by the control of what can be known. He began to notice strange patterns around him, people appearing in his laboratory for no clear reason. Men following him through the streets of New York in discreet clothing with fixed gazes. Mail opened before reaching its destination. Silent phone calls. All of this created a disturbing atmosphere, as if he were being constantly watched. And this feeling wasn't paranoia. Documents released decades later confirmed that Tesla was closely monitored. But why? He wasn't building weapons. He wasn't plotting against governments. He wasn't threatening any nation. He was studying vibrations, frequencies, energy, and perhaps that's precisely why his work was so dangerous. Have you ever wondered why society readily accepts certain explanations, but violently rejects others? Why are concepts like emotional energy, human field, intuition, and synchronicity treated as irrelevant, even though they are so present in human experience? Perhaps because these ideas give power back to people, and systems based on control do not want powerful individuals. Tesla discovered that many of his notes on resonance, especially those related to harmonic patterns influencing the emotional environment, had simply vanished. He kept numbered, organized, and cataloged notebooks, but when he went to look for them, some were missing, others had been rearranged, and still others were returned weeks later with pages torn out. This is where the story changes again. Someone was filtering scientific progress. It wasn't just a boycott, it was curation, as if there were a silent, invisible organization responsible for selecting which discoveries could see the light of day and which should be buried in oblivion. Think for a moment. How many incredible inventions have you never heard of? How many technologies were created and erased before they even reached the public? What if part of human history was a collection of unpublished chapters? Tesla realized this painfully while working on his famous mechanical oscillator. He claimed that the right vibration could generate surprising effects, from small changes in matter to drastic alterations, such as the collapse of entire structures. The most famous experiment from this phase was when his laboratory shook violently, frightening the entire neighborhood. But Tesla never officially admitted what really happened that afternoon. He simply smiled, like someone who discovers a monumental truth but knows he cannot reveal it. The truth is that Tesla had realized something much bigger. Resonance doesn't just affect physical objects. It affects thoughts, emotions, and even human behavior. He believed that places carry vibrational memories, that certain environments hold energies from situations that occurred there. Have you ever entered a place that felt heavy, even when nothing was wrong? Or have you ever been to an environment that transmitted immediate peace, even without a logical explanation? Tesla would have been intrigued by this. For him, emotional energy wasn't superstition, it was physics. If everything vibrates, then emotions vibrate, and if emotions vibrate, they leave marks. He believed it was possible to measure these marks, and perhaps even alter them. This idea opened dangerous doors. Imagine if it were possible to manipulate human emotions through frequency. Imagine if it were possible to calm crowds, induce collective fear, awaken euphoria or apathy using specific vibrational patterns. It wouldn't just be science, it would be psychological control on a global scale. At this very moment, a question arises almost as a whisper. Is anyone already using this? Tesla never directly stated that this type of manipulation existed, but he left clues. In a little-known interview, he said that whoever controls frequency controls the mind, and whoever controls the mind controls humanity. A phrase that seems simple, but becomes frightening when we consider its scope. Imagine the ability to influence the internal vibration of millions of people at the same time. Imagine the power to adjust emotional states with the same ease as changing a radio station. Do you really think that possibility would be ignored by governments, corporations, or institutions of power? Tesla knew he was treading on forbidden ground. He realized he couldn't continue advancing without facing consequences, and the consequences began to appear. Investors stopped funding him, contracts were canceled, projects were halted, close people disappeared without explanation. It was as if a shadow had settled over his life. But even more unsettling was the feeling that he wasn't alone in this discovery. He believed that other scientists around the world were also reaching the same conclusions, but none of them were willing to speak publicly. Tesla felt isolated, like someone who sees an abyss while everyone around pretends the ground is solid. At this point, an inevitable question arises. Who is afraid of a humanity aware of the power of its own vibration? Why is there so much effort to keep people distracted, fragmented, disconnected from themselves? And what would happen if this information became public? Tesla delved even deeper into the analysis of frequencies that affected the human body. He believed that there were specific patterns that awakened calm, mental clarity, intuition, and creativity. Others generated anxiety, agitation, and confusion. And some, the most dangerous, could induce collective emotional states of fear or submission. A curious example is something you've probably already felt: the discomfort of an almost inaudible noise, like a low vibration that can't be identified but produces unease. It's common for people to feel this in shopping malls, corporate environments, and large stores. Tesla said this isn't accidental. Frequencies can influence behavior, for better or for worse. He observed that when certain vibrational patterns appear in the environment, humans are more likely to consume, obey, or act impulsively. This study was never officially completed, but fragments of the research still exist today in private documents. The great revelation, however, was yet to come. Tesla discovered that there was a central frequency, what he believed to be the original vibration, that did not provoke fear or submission. On the contrary, it awakened an expanded perception, as if consciousness were expanding. It was the frequency he called the matrix. According to him, this matrix not only reorganized energy, but also connected mind, body, and environment simultaneously. It was a kind of conscious web that interconnected all living beings. Now consider this. If a frequency can awaken consciousness, why isn't it accessible to the public? Why don't we learn about it in school? Why isn't there a global effort to study and understand this phenomenon? Tesla believed he knew the answer. He said that power systems exist to survive, not to enlighten. If humanity awakened to its own vibration, many of these systems would cease to make sense. And that is why, according to him, the most important discoveries of his life were erased from official records. But if this story were only about the manipulation of knowledge, it would already be alarming enough. The problem is that Tesla realized something even deeper. The matrix vibration was not just scientific, it was spiritual, and not in a religious sense, but in the sense that it connected human consciousness to something greater, something he described as the intelligence of the universe. The question now is, what really happens when a human mind tunes into this matrix? What awakens within the person? And how could this change not only their life, but the entire social structure around them? Tesla never finished this research. He was interrupted. But he left enough clues for us to understand that he was approaching a dangerous limit, a limit that could transform everything. The next part will reveal what Tesla discovered about the human body as an antenna for this vibrational field, and why this revelation remains one of the most feared in the history of science. After realizing that someone was filtering his findings and manipulating the progress of his research, Tesla began to look at the human body with a new focus. He stopped analyzing only machines and began to investigate how the organism itself reacts to external frequencies. From that point on, his trajectory became even more risky, because what he discovered not only touched on science, but also biology, psychology, human behavior, and even spirituality. He understood, more than any researcher of his time, that the human being is not just flesh, blood, and bones. It is an antenna, an electromagnetic structure capable of capturing, emitting, and responding to vibrations. To understand the depth of this, imagine an old radio. It doesn't create music. It only translates invisible waves that are already circulating in the environment. Tesla believed that the human body does the same thing. It doesn't create thoughts out of nothing. It picks up thoughts. It doesn't create isolated emotions. It responds to vibrational fields around it. This vision may seem bold, but it's closer to reality than we imagine. Modern studies show that the human heart produces an electromagnetic field up to 5,000 times stronger than that of the brain. This field can be measured several meters away and directly influences the nervous system of other people. This is known today as limbic resonance. Tesla was already talking about this long before modern science discovered it. He believed that emotions were not just internal sensations, but vibrations that enter and leave the body. For him, sadness, anger, joy, connection, love, all of these have specific vibrational patterns. Interestingly, current studies from the HeartMath Institute show that emotions like gratitude and compassion generate coherent and harmonious heart frequencies, while emotions like fear and anxiety generate chaotic and irregular patterns. This is exactly what Tesla believed. He said that when we are in emotional harmony, we access higher states of consciousness. And when we are in emotional disorder, we lose access to our own intuitive intelligence. To illustrate this, imagine the following story. A woman enters a hospital with severe chest pains. Cardiac exams show she is not having a heart attack. The doctors say it's anxiety, but she insists, "It's not anxiety, it's as if my heart is hearing something." The curious thing is that night, a large shopping mall next to the hospital was testing a new ventilation system that emitted a low, almost imperceptible frequency, between 17 and 19 hertz. Studies show that frequencies in this range can cause feelings of discomfort, palpitations, and even paranoia. The woman wasn't imagining it. She was reacting to a real vibration. Tesla predicted exactly this. The human body responds to the environment like a biological antenna, even without the person consciously realizing it. Another fascinating example occurs in places considered sacred. Waterfalls, mountains, ancient temples, and even dense forests often emit high levels of negative ions into the air. These ions improve mood, reduce stress, and increase mental clarity. People report profound feelings of peace in these places. Tesla believed that these effects were not spiritual in the traditional sense, but vibrational. He said that energetically charged places change people's internal state. And if this is true for natural environments, imagine what could be done with artificially created environments. He also observed that certain places seem to drain human energy. You know when you enter a place and feel tired for no reason? Or when you meet someone and, after a few minutes of conversation, feel as if your energy has been sucked away? Tesla believed that this also had a vibrational origin. For him, each person has a field around their body, something similar to what we call bioelectromagnetism today. If two people have very different frequencies, they enter into vibrational conflict. This conflict can generate physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. It's not superstition. It's physics. Based on these observations, Tesla began to do something that made many people uncomfortable. He compared the human body to a transmission tower. He believed that the brain receives and sends signals like an antenna, and that the nervous system functions like an electrical circuit, sensitive to surrounding vibrations. This led him to study ancient cultures that spoke of vital energy, chi, prana, life force, not as mystical concepts, but as complex vibrational systems. The most surprising thing is that decades later, modern studies have confirmed that human cells communicate through electrical vibrations. Research by Dr. Robert O. Becker shows that the body uses electromagnetic signals to guide biological processes, including healing. This means Tesla was right. Biology is not just chemistry, it's vibration. Tesla also believed that the human body can enter specific vibrational states that amplify natural abilities. He said that when we are emotionally aligned, our electromagnetic field becomes stronger, and this allows intuition to become more precise. Situations such as premonitions, déjà vu, feelings of alertness, or intense connections with other people would be manifestations of this amplified state. How many times have you felt that something was wrong before it even happened, or sensed that something good was coming without being able to explain it? Tesla considered these events signs that the human vibrational field was in tune with the environment. A curious fact that reinforces this idea comes from a study at Princeton University, where researchers discovered that random number generators, completely independent machines, began to behave less randomly minutes before significant collective emotional events, such as disasters or global celebrations. This suggests that mass human consciousness influences the planet's energy field. Tesla already intuited this when he said that the mind is not confined to the body. But the most surprising part of Tesla's research involved the possibility that the human body not only responds to external vibrations, but can also alter its surrounding environment. He believed that certain intense emotional states create fields strong enough to influence objects and systems. He mentioned that coherent emotions could literally rearrange particles around them. This may seem fanciful, but today, we know that subatomic particles behave differently when observed. The famous double-slit experiment shows that consciousness directly interferes with the behavior of matter. Tesla was ahead of his time in suggesting that human emotion and attention can influence the physical world. To understand this practically, imagine a person trying to grow plants in a controlled environment. In a 2012 experiment, researchers discovered that plants cared for with positive intention, kind words, and frequent attention grew faster, had greener leaves, and were more resistant to disease. This effect was not attributed to water, light, or soil, but to the vibrational interaction between human and plant. Tesla said exactly that. Where there is life, there is vibration. Where there is vibration, there is communication. Another surprising story comes from a little-known experiment conducted with water crystals. When a sample was exposed to harmonious sounds, positive thoughts, or words like love and gratitude, the frozen crystals formed beautiful, symmetrical patterns. However, when exposed to anger, insults, or chaotic sounds, the crystals formed broken, fragmented, and ugly patterns. This suggests that water itself responds to emotional vibration. And considering that the human body is composed of about 70% water, the implication is obvious. Our emotions reorganize our biology. Tesla intuitively knew this to be true. He said that disordered emotions create disordered fields, and disordered fields create disease. This doesn't mean that negative feelings are wrong, but that they directly influence the body's vibrational state. Today, studies show that chronic stress reduces heart rate variability, an important vibrational marker for health. When variability decreases, the risks of anxiety, depression, and heart problems increase. This is exactly what Tesla predicted when he said that the more the human field loses coherence, the more vulnerable it becomes. One of the most profound aspects of Tesla's research involved the idea that human consciousness not only responds to the world, but also creates an effect upon it. He tested different frequencies using simple objects, water, metals, pieces of wood, to observe how they reacted. But what was most impressive was the effect on himself. He perceived changes in his own intuition, sensitivity, mental clarity, and even emotions. He said this proved that the human body is not just a receiver, but an amplifier. This idea completely transformed his view of spirituality. For Tesla, spirituality was not belief, it was physics. He believed that elevated emotional states generated frequencies that brought human beings closer to the matrix vibration, the one he considered the signature of the Creator. He said that when a person enters this state, they not only heal themselves, but also reorganize their own reality. At this point in the narrative, an inevitable question arises. If the human body can access vibrational states capable of altering perception, energy, and even matter, who would have an interest in preventing this from being discovered? Tesla believed that the answers lay hidden in the way modern societies were structured. He observed how people spent more time stressed than connected, more time reacting than creating, more time in emotional chaos than in harmony. And he said that this was no accident. Urban environments, excessive noise, artificial vibrations, constant advertising, all of this creates chaotic fields that nullify the natural vibrational state of human beings. And it is at this point that the final question of this section becomes inevitable. If the human body is truly a perfect vibrational antenna, capable of accessing deep states of consciousness and reorganizing reality itself, then what exactly happens when this body is tuned to the matrix frequency that Tesla discovered? The answer is in the next part, and it's more profound than you might think. After understanding the human body as a vibrational antenna, Tesla knew he was approaching the most delicate point of all his research. Because if the body can receive vibrations from the environment, could it also emit frequencies capable of altering reality itself? This question guided his most daring studies. He no longer wanted to simply understand the matrix vibration. He wanted to discover how to access it consciously, deliberately, almost as if one could tune into the very core of the universe. The idea of internal resonance, the ability to align body, mind, and energy field, seemed simple in theory, but was extremely complex in practice. How do you create a coherent emotional state? How do you silence a mind that produces thousands of thoughts a day? How do you stabilize a heart that reacts to every environmental stimulus? Tesla knew that this alignment would not be achieved through intellectual knowledge alone. It required presence, attention, intention, and profound emotional control. He began recording in his journal patterns that emerged whenever he experienced heightened states of lucidity, moments of profound silence when the environment seemed to stop, sensations of inner lightness, as if his body were gently vibrating, mental flashes that brought complete solutions to problems he had been studying for months. He wrote everything down because he realized that these states were not random. They had specific triggers. And the most surprising thing is that these triggers didn't come from the outside world. They came from within himself. A particular breathing rhythm, for example, seemed to open up mental space. A spontaneous feeling of gratitude or compassion broadened his perception. A slower heart rate created an internal stability that increased his capacity for intuition. Tesla began to realize that tuning into the matrix frequency didn't happen through technology, but through very specific emotional and mental states. Imagine this happening to you, realizing that by adjusting your internal state, the external world begins to respond differently. That small events seem to unfold more smoothly, that difficult decisions become clear, that the right people appear at the right time. Science calls this selective attention, but Tesla had another name, conscious resonance. He believed that when the body achieves coherence, when breath, emotion, mind, and energy vibrate in the same rhythm, consciousness expands, not as abstract spiritual enlightenment, but as heightened focus, instant clarity, and heightened intuition. He described this state as a bridge between the human mind and the creative field, as if it were possible to access information that was not available at the ordinary level of consciousness. This idea may seem far-fetched, but try this mental exercise. Think about the times you've been in a deep state of presence, walking alone at night, gazing at the sea, listening to music that deeply moved you. In those moments, your mind wasn't making noise. It was open. And in that state, how many times have you received spontaneous ideas, insights, or understandings that seemed to come from nowhere? Tesla believed that these moments are clues, signs that human consciousness already knows the way, even if society has taught you to ignore it. But Tesla wanted more than spontaneous moments. He wanted to understand if it was possible to induce this state whenever he wished. He wanted to know if the matrix vibration could be accessed repeatedly, like someone learning to play a specific note until they achieve perfection. It was at this point that his studies became even more profound and potentially more dangerous. He began testing the interaction between emotions and vibration. He observed that states such as compassion, gratitude, and calm created coherent patterns that facilitated attunement. In contrast, fear, anger, and anxiety generated vibrational chaos that blocked any access to the creative field. It wasn't just psychological, it was physical. Tesla recorded changes in his own heart rate, body temperature, and even brain activity when he entered these states. He said that the average human mind is like a light bulb that flickers all the time, but when it becomes coherent, it turns into a laser, a concentrated, powerful, precise force. For him, the matrix vibration could only be accessed when a person ceased to be noise and became rhythm. This discovery led Tesla to delve into ancient cultures that spoke of meditation, deep breathing, and altered states of consciousness. But he did not interpret these practices as spiritual rituals. For him, they were vibrational technologies, methods for bringing the human body into harmony with more subtle fields. He even wrote that the future of science will be the study of the mind and its relationship to energy. This phrase has become almost a prophecy, because today, more than 100 years later, we have studies showing exactly that. Neuroscience research reveals that deep meditative states alter brain waves to more coherent patterns. Cardiac studies show that emotional coherence creates physiological stability, and quantum experiments show that observers influence the behavior of matter. All this confirms what Tesla already intuited. The human mind not only observes the universe, it interacts with it. Tesla also noticed something even more impressive. When he accessed states of internal coherence, his sensitivity increased extraordinarily. He could perceive vibrations that were previously imperceptible. Sounds became clearer. Light seemed more vivid. Colors seemed more intense. He recorded this as an increase in sensory range. It wasn't hallucination. It was perceptual expansion. And here an inevitable question arises. If human beings can expand their perception through vibrational states, why isn't this taught to everyone from an early age? Why do we grow up learning to ignore our internal sensations and focus only on external stimuli? Tesla believed this was no coincidence. He said that an overly conscious human being is a threat to any system based on control. Imagine a society where millions of people know how to achieve emotional coherence, where they don't allow themselves to be manipulated by fear, where they can sense the truth behind empty rhetoric, where important decisions are made with calm, clarity, and intuitive perception. This type of humanity would be impossible to dominate. Tesla understood that this knowledge had the potential to liberate individuals and destabilize systems. He also realized that the matrix vibration was not an isolated concept. It had real physical effects. In confidential experiments, Tesla claimed that this frequency could accelerate healing processes in the human body. He observed that small wounds healed faster when he entered a coherent vibrational state. He felt less fatigue, less pain, less mental confusion. He wrote that internal coherence seemed to reorganize the body's vital energy. Today we know that the body releases specific hormones during these states: endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, substances that regulate mood, immunity, and vitality. This reinforces what Tesla said. When the vibration changes, the body changes. But there is something even deeper. Tesla believed that the matrix vibration had the power to alter not only the momentary emotional state, but the very structure of human DNA. This idea seemed absurd in his time, but today we know that gene expressions can change according to emotional and mental states. Epigenetic studies show that traumas can leave marks on DNA, just as states of equilibrium can reverse them. This means that Tesla was, once again, far ahead of his time. The most delicate part of Tesla's research involved the idea that when a person enters a state of deep vibrational coherence, they connect to a larger field, something many would call spiritual, but which Tesla saw as pure science. He said that this connection gave access not only to one's own intuition, but to an intelligence that seemed to come from outside, a kind of invisible network in which all consciousness was interconnected. This concept resembles what we now call a unified field or quantum information field. Tesla believed that this field was intelligent, not in the human sense, but in the sense of perfect organization. He claimed that inspired thoughts, Great ideas and brilliant insights came from this field when the mind was vibrationally aligned. He said that the universe speaks, but can only be heard in silence. Imagine for a moment consciously accessing this field, receiving answers to questions you've carried for years, feeling exactly what you need to do in critical moments of your life, knowing when to act and when to wait, sensing dangers before they approach, perceiving opportunities before they become visible. Tesla believed all this was possible when a person aligned themselves with the matrix vibration. He dedicated his last years to trying to understand exactly how this alignment happened, and he discovered that emotions were the key, not logic, not intellect. Emotions, especially the deepest ones such as compassion, pure love, presence, and gratitude, were vibrational states compatible with the matrix. Emotions like fear, anger, guilt, or despair disconnected the person from the field. Tesla said that the heart is the compass of vibration. This statement opens frighteningly deep doors. If emotions influence access to the creative field, then systems based on fear and anxiety not only control behavior, but prevent human contact with that vibration. This means that entire societies can be kept away from expanded consciousness through emotional chaos. Tesla saw this as the true prison of humanity, but he also saw the way out. He knew that when a person achieves emotional coherence, everything around them responds. The environment changes, people change, the body changes, reality changes. He believed that if enough individuals reached this state, a collective transformation would occur, something like a global resonance that would change the course of humanity. It was at this point that Tesla realized his discovery transcended science and became a calling. He knew he would never have enough time to complete the research, but he also knew that everything he had discovered was real and that someone would need to continue it. The question that concludes this section is as simple as it is profound. If access to the matrix vibration is within you, in your breath, in your heart, in your emotions, what is preventing you from reaching it now? The answer to this transforms not only science, but the very essence of what it means to be human. When Tesla reached the ultimate limit of his research, he found no machines, formulas, or equations waiting for him. What he found was silence. A silence that was not empty, but full. A silence that seemed to observe, teach, and embrace. A silence that revealed that the matrix vibration, what he believed to be the original frequency of the universe, was not out there, among coils, wires, and electric fields. It was within, in a place so simple that almost no one dares to look for it. For Tesla, this was the most profound shock of all. After a lifetime of trying to control matter, electricity, and energy, he discovered that the most powerful frequency was the one that arises from human consciousness itself. And this not only changed how he saw the world, it changed how he saw himself. He wrote in one of the last preserved passages from his notebooks, "The key is not in my machines, it is in the human heart." This conclusion shook him because it meant that anyone, regardless of intelligence, wealth, or position, could access the matrix vibration. It wasn't a technology reserved for scientists. It was a universal human possibility, and that's what made his discovery so dangerous for power structures. If the matrix vibration can be accessed by anyone, then power ceases to be centralized. It becomes distributed. It spreads. It becomes human. But this understanding raises an important question. If everyone has access to the matrix frequency, why do so few manage to perceive it? The answer lies in the way we live. The modern mind is always racing. The body is always tense. Emotions are always reactive. There is no space for silence, presence, or coherence. And without coherence, there is no vibrational harmony. Tesla said that a disorganized mind creates interference in the field. That's why so many people feel that something is missing, but can't explain what. It's the misaligned internal vibration seeking to return to its natural rhythm. But there's a crucial point. Just as an out-of-tune instrument can be tuned again, the human body can also be aligned. And this is where the practical plan comes in. The real, simple, and direct path for anyone to apply the teachings of this video in a concrete, transformative, and continuous way. The first step is silence. Not the absolute silence of the external world, but inner silence. Tesla discovered that the matrix vibration can only be perceived when the mind has space to listen. This means setting aside a few minutes each day to breathe deeply, slow down the mind, and observe one's own inner state. It's not complex meditation, it's not a ritual, it's not an advanced technique. It's presence, just presence. It's closing your eyes for 3 minutes and allowing the mind to stop fighting. It may seem small, but this first step already changes the vibration of the inner field. The second step is emotional coherence. Tesla realized that emotions like gratitude, compassion, and honesty with oneself create strong and stable vibrational patterns. It's not about denying negative emotions, but about recognizing which states strengthen or weaken one's own energy. A simple way to do this is to identify every day 3 small moments that evoked positive feelings. These can be details: a smile, a kind gesture, a thought that brought calm. This exercise reprograms emotional vibration and expands sensitivity to the surrounding field. The third step is the alignment between intention and action. Tesla believed that the matrix vibration responds to clear intentions. He said that human intention is like a vibrational command, but intention without action is just fantasy. Therefore, a powerful way to access the matrix vibration is to choose a small daily action that is aligned with what you want to become. Something simple, but consistent. It could be drinking water mindfully, walking for 5 minutes without your cell phone, writing 2 lines about something you want to transform in your life. Vibration is created by repetition, not intensity. The fourth step is vibrational cleansing. This has nothing mystical about it. It's simply logic. Disorganized environments create disorganized minds. Toxic people create emotional interference. Constant negative information creates internal noise. Tesla said that the human field absorbs more than it perceives. This means that to align with the matrix frequency, it is necessary to reduce the excess of stimuli that drain energy. A simple method is to choose a small space, a drawer, a table, a corner of the room, and consciously organize it. This act creates external clarity, and through resonance, internal clarity. The fifth step is the expansion of perception. Tesla believed that intuition is not magic. It is a natural effect of a harmonized inner field. Intuition arises when the mind is clear enough to perceive signs that have always been there, but which were previously filtered by internal chaos. To activate this, a person can practice observing what they previously ignored. Patterns, coincidences, bodily sensations, small changes in the environment. The more perception, the more attunement. The more attunement, the more access to the vibrational field. It's a self-reinforcing cycle. Finally, the sixth step is the most profound of all: emotional courage. Tesla knew that many people avoid looking at themselves because they fear what they might find. But the vibration of the matrix cannot be accessed by a fragmented consciousness. It takes courage to acknowledge fears, patterns, desires, and limitations. Courage to admit what needs to be changed. Courage to allow oneself to grow. When a person begins to act from emotional truth and not from the social mask, their vibration aligns with extraordinary precision, and it is in this alignment that the matrix reveals itself. These 6 steps form a simple, direct, and profoundly transformative plan. They require no technology. They require no money. They require no advanced knowledge. They require only the daily decision to reconnect with one's own vibration. Tesla believed that all of humanity could awaken if millions of people applied this principle. Because when a single life changes, its field changes. When many change, the collective field reorganizes. And when the collective field changes, reality as we know it begins to transform. That's why this final part isn't a conclusion. It's an invitation. An invitation for you not only to understand the matrix vibration intellectually, but to experience, feel, and embody this knowledge. Because true transformation doesn't happen in what you watch. It happens in what you decide to do with what you've learned. Before we conclude, ask yourself a question, a simple but powerful one. What kind of life could I live if I were aligned with my natural vibration every day? The answer to this question isn't in any book, in any scientist, in any theory. It's within you. It always has been, and now that you know this, nothing can return you to a state of vibrational ignorance. Not completely. Something is already awakened. If this video touched you in any way, if it opened an inner door or brought clarity to something you felt but couldn't explain, I invite you to take the next step. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey with me. Like this video so it reaches more people who need to hear this message. And share your questions, experiences, or feelings here in the comments, anonymously if you prefer. Your story can enlighten someone who is going through the same search. Thank you for being here. Thank you for feeling. Thank you for vibrating. Change begins within, and you've just started the process.